AITA for canceling my daughter's wedding and honeymoon after she called me embarrassing? Hello, everyone. I never thought I would be posting a story like this, but here we are. This whole situation has been absolutely insane. My daughter told me I was too embarrassing to walk her down the aisle and wanted my ex's boyfriend to take my place. I did not raise my voice. I raised my boundaries, pulled the funding, collected the dress in my name, and dug into public records. What I found showed up at the rehearsal dinner inside a manila envelope. No scenes, just signatures, consequences, and a wedding put on pause. If you like revenge where the loud guy gets fact-checked by a clerk, keep reading. I am 48, divorced, with one daughter. I have a steady job as a civil engineer and the personality you get from years of arguing with concrete and timelines. My daughter, Haley, is 19. Smart, stubborn in a way that made me proud when she was little and later made me grind my teeth. Let's back up a bit. When Haley was born, I sprinted into the emergency room, pushing a wheelchair like I had stolen it and forgotten to put Monica in it. I parked the empty chair, turned around, and she was walking behind me with a look that said, "Really?" A nurse sat me in the chair for everyone's safety and wheeled me to the room while Monica walked beside us, laughing. Later, when Monica, her mother, and I divorced, we split custody cleanly. No shouting in a courtroom, just two people who could not live together without dragging each other down. I kept the house because I could afford it and because stability matters for a child. Monica moved 2 towns over. We built a routine that was not perfect, but it worked. I never missed a school event. I put money into a college plan from the day she was born. We maintained an emergency fund in her name, separate from mine, so I would not make decisions from ego instead of her needs. When she entered cosmetology school last year and told me she wanted to marry her boyfriend, Tristan, I did not give a speech about being too young. I asked for her plan, budget, timeline, and expectations. They had a plan. It was naive, but all first plans are. I told her I would cover the dress and help with vendors if they kept things reasonable. Reasonable became a hard number. I would contribute up to $25,000 total, including $15,000 for her dress, because she wanted a specific one from a boutique she had followed online since she was 16. I gave her the number in writing and explained how I would pay for it. Deposits on my credit cards, invoices in my name, and payments sent directly to vendors. I did it this way on purpose because I have seen people hand cash to friends of friends who do weddings and then spend 6 months chasing ghosts. I wanted receipts I could stack in a binder and point to if something went sideways. Everything moved fast. The first dress appointment was a carefully staged production with lemon water and clipboards. I stood in the back, pretending not to care while they adjusted the lace. She smiled at herself in the mirror like a kid riding a bike with no hands for the first time. I paid the bill after she made her final choice. With alterations, a rush order, and some fancy word that basically meant handmade work you cannot really see unless you are the one paying. The total came to $15,482, paid in full on my card, with my name and address on the invoice. Delivery was scheduled for 6 weeks after the last fitting. Only the purchaser could pick it up unless formal authorization was filed. I read every line and signed everything they asked me to. Then came the venue with its refund schedule, a photographer with a non-refundable deposit, a caterer with a guest count deadline, a bakery that required payment 10 days out, and a travel agency booking a week in Hawaii for the honeymoon. I paid the deposits, put all the dates in a color-coded spreadsheet with alerts. I was not trying to control anything. I was trying to protect what I was putting in so that if something broke, I could fix it. That is who I am. Monica and I remained cordial. She had a boyfriend, Cameron, who entered our lives like a billboard, a loud watch, louder stories, always box fresh sneakers, and an energy that drowns out nuance. He sold luxury experiences online, which, when I asked what that meant, turned into a speech about brand vibes and curated living. I did not push. My relationship with Monica was over years ago. I had one job, to support my daughter without losing my self-respect. 2 months into planning, I got a text from Haley asking if I could meet her and Monica at Monica's house. No context. It was a Tuesday. I went after work, still in a collared shirt and dust from a site visit. Cameron was there on the couch, talking about a collaboration with a guy who reupholsters car interiors. I waited for Haley to speak. She had a small notebook in her lap and the posture of someone trying to be brave in a room that thrives on performance. She took a breath and said it plainly. She did not want me to walk her down the aisle. She wanted Cameron to do it. I did not react, not because it did not hurt, but because I have learned the first thing you say is usually the worst and the hardest to take back. I asked her why. She said I was a great dad, but I did not own her, and I was controlling the wedding with my money. She also admitted that the idea of me walking her down the aisle was embarrassing, something she did not want in front of everyone. Monica nodded. Cameron put on a face of false humility and still did not say no. I have never in my life used the phrase, "I own you." I have never told her she owed me anything. I have only asked to be told the truth and treated like the father who showed up. Still, those words landed. Not because they were true, but because if that is how she felt, it meant I had failed to make my support feel like support. Embarrassing was what really did the damage. It is a word for an ugly tie, not for your father. I kept my voice steady, but my jaw was tight. Moreover, the replacement of her father in a symbolic moment by a man who had been in her life for months had been rehearsed without me. I told her I respected her right to choose. I said the aisle was hers, but I also said the money was mine, and I decided where it went. If the message was that my role was unwelcome, then my financial role was unwelcome too. If I was an embarrassment at the aisle, my money did not need a front row seat. I told them I would be withdrawing my support for the wedding and the honeymoon. I said I would cover any non-refundable amounts already paid and nothing more. I told them I hoped they had a beautiful day and a strong marriage, and that my door would still be open to my daughter every day before and after the event. Monica told me not to come if I was going to bring a cloud with me. Cameron laughed. It was not a loud laugh. It was the kind of chuckle a guy uses to let you know he thinks you are soft. Haley started to cry. She said she loved me. She also said again that nobody owned her. I told her I did not own her. I left. Then I did exactly what I said I would do. The next morning, I sent an email to Haley and Monica summarizing my decision. I listed the vendors I had paid, the amounts, the terms, and what I considered my responsibility. I attached PDFs of all the receipts. I told them I would be formally notifying each vendor that I was no longer the point of contact and would be making no further payments. I asked them to confirm a new contact person for each vendor. I told them they could take over any contracts that were in good standing. This was not punishment, it was clarity. I called the travel agency and canceled the honeymoon. I had purchased the package with free cancellation up to 30 days prior. We were 44 days out. I lost $50 on a booking fee. I accepted it. The rest was refunded to my card. I emailed the venue. The second payment was not due for 2 weeks. I told them I would not be paying it. The contract allowed for a change of the responsible party. I sent over the form. I notified the photographer in writing. I told the caterer that the guest count would need a new responsible party. I pulled the shared wedding folder from my main drive and removed myself from the shared planning app. The wedding dress was the delicate part. I had paid for it in full. The boutique had a strict policy: no refunds, no returns, no exchanges. Only the purchaser could pick it up unless formal authorization was filed. I had filed none. I called and spoke to the owner. I told her there was a family conflict and that I would be picking up the dress myself when it was ready. I sent a follow-up email confirming that instruction. I put a calendar reminder for the pickup window and marked it high priority. When the email hit Monica's and Haley's inboxes, Haley called me. She was sobbing and then screaming. I let her talk. She said I was ruining her wedding. I repeated exactly what I had said in the living room. I'm not trying to ruin anything. I am stepping back because my role is unwelcome. I am not going to pay for a performance where I am told to sit in the audience like a distant cousin. She hung up. I got a string of texts from Monica about what a real father is and about hidden conditions. I did not reply. I saved them. For the next week, I went about my life. Work, gym, groceries. I did not watch the planning unfold on social media. I did not need the play-by-play. What I did do was plan the part one actually control, my boundaries and my property. If you think that is petty, you have never been the person paying for a room you are not allowed to enter. 2 days later, the travel agent forwarded me an email. Cameron had called her, trying to take over the honeymoon reservation and upgrade the itinerary. He was not on the booking. She told him she could not speak with him. He asked who had paid for it, and she said she could not share that information. He said he was family, and it was his show now. The agent did not have to forward me that. She did it because she was annoyed. It also made me think. You do not try to upgrade a trip that is not yours unless you are used to walking into rooms you did not pay for and sitting at the head of the table. That night, I did what I do when something does not add up. I ran a public records search on Cameron, cross-referencing names and taking notes. His legal name was Christopher. In the morning, I made calls to verify what I found and requested the documentation. I was not guessing anymore. I kept it to myself and moved on. Meanwhile, the dress was ready early. The boutique owner called and asked if I wanted to pick it up on Friday. I left work half an hour early, signed the release, inspected the garment, and carried it to my truck like it was fragile equipment. It felt heavier than it should. I was not taking it to burn it or hold it for ransom. I was taking it because it was mine until I gave it away, and because I refused to be the guy who pays for everything and then watches someone else pretend it arrived by magic. I put it in the closet of a spare room in my house with a dehumidifier humming down the hall. I sent an email to the boutique confirming the pickup and asking them to update their records. They replied with a thank you and an attached copy of the signed release bearing my signature. Haley called the next day. She had gone to the boutique to try on the dress again for fun with her friends. They told her the dress had already been collected by the purchaser. She accused me of sabotaging her wedding. I told her directly, the dress is safe. It will remain safe. It is not a prop for friends. It is a dress purchased with my money as a gift for a wedding I am no longer funding or attending unless and until I am treated as more than a checkbook. I told her that when she wanted to talk like an adult, she knew where to find me. Then I hung up. I did not do it for drama. I did it because I was done being a punching bag for other people's rehearsed speeches. By Wednesday, I had the county records myself, a 2021 marriage certificate with no recorded dissolution, the kind you read once and then again, slower. Christopher Cameron had been married in a neighboring state in 2021. There was no record of a divorce, no finalized dissolution, no annulment. The marriage record was public from the county clerk's office. The private investigator included instructions for getting certified copies and contact information. He also attached a note indicating there was an active attempt to serve him with a separation lawsuit filed by that spouse 6 months ago. The attempts had failed because he was not at the addresses she had. The investigator found a current address, Monica's house. I called the clerk and arranged for certified copies of the marriage record to be mailed to me. I called a lawyer who owed me nothing and asked her if I could legally share public marriage records with people directly affected by them. She said, yes, as long as you do not alter anything or misrepresent the facts. I called the PI back and asked if the wife had legal representation. He could not share her lawyer's information, but he could tell me her name because it was on the filings, Danielle. I found her on social media in 5 minutes. A normal profile, family photos, no drama. I sent her a short message. I am the father of a young woman who is about to have a wedding where a man named Christopher Cameron is being treated as a father figure. I have reason to believe you are legally married to him. I have no interest in your personal life, except where it concerns my daughter's safety. If you need the time and place of events where he will be present so you can have him legally served, I can share them. I will not be involved beyond that. She replied the next day. Her message was brief. She confirmed she was legally married to him. She said she had filed for separation, and he had been avoiding service. She asked if he would be somewhere on Friday afternoon, which was the scheduled rehearsal at the restaurant attached to the venue. I told her yes. I gave her the time. I gave her the address. I told her to give it to a process server. I asked her not to bring drama, not to come herself, and not to involve my daughter. She agreed. I sent her nothing else. I did not tell her about the dress or the honeymoon or anything that was not her business. Friday arrived like any Friday where you have set a plan in motion that you can no longer stop. I was not going to the rehearsal. I did not need to be there to watch people pretend I was the problem. I took my truck to get an oil change and sat in a wobbly plastic chair reading a paperback to get out of my own head. At 7:26 in the evening, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I did not recognize. Service complete. It was the process server. The text included a photo of the paperwork and a timestamp. 30 minutes later, my phone exploded. First Monica, then Haley, then a number I did not have saved that I assumed was Tristan or his mother. Cameron had been served mid-rehearsal with separation papers and a notice referencing his current marriage. It was not dramatic the way people imagine. It was legal, quiet, and humiliating. exactly the way the truth is when it scrapes the shine off things. I did not answer. Not right away. I read the texts because that is what you do when you love someone, even when they are nicking you with tiny cuts. Haley's first text was a scream made of letters. The second was a question. Was this you? The third was a simple why. I wrote back. You made a choice about who represents you. I made a choice about what I pay for and what I tolerate. The rest is consequence. You are 19. You have a right to be wrong. I have a right to stop you from walking into a fire when I see smoke. She called. I answered. Her voice was down a register, the one she used as a little girl when she had a fever and asked me to sit on the floor by her bed. She asked if the papers were real. I told her how to confirm it. County clerk, case number listed on the document. She asked if I did it to hurt her. I told her I did it to put the truth on the table. The man you put in my place has a wife. That wife is trying to legally separate from him. That man laughed at me in your living room. I am not going to let him pose as a patriarch in front of my daughter. Monica's texts were different. They were accusatory. They tried to frame the service as an incident of harassment. They said I had ruined everything because I could not stand not being the center. There was an attempt to threaten legal action. I replied with a single text and 2 attachments: the certified marriage certificate and a copy of the state statute on service of process in civil matters. I wrote one sentence. Public records, legally served. The next day was the wedding. I had not planned to go. I kept that plan. Around noon, Haley called and said the ceremony was on pause. The groom's parents had questions, and the officiant wanted to meet privately. She asked me to come to the venue, just to talk. I told her I would meet her in the parking lot. I drove over and parked under a tree away from the main entrance, where guests were arriving with smiles that would soon fade into whispers. Haley came out in a robe, her hair half done. She looked small and old at the same time. She sat in the passenger seat. She cried without making a sound. When she could speak, she told me the officiant would not proceed without clarity. The groom's parents were calm in a way that humbles you. They asked for a postponement. There were no scenes. There were facts, and the facts demanded a pause. She asked if I would walk her down the aisle. She said the symbolism mattered again. I said yes, but not today. I told her I was not going to be the bandage on a wound someone else had caused. I told her she deserved a day that was not covered in someone else's lies. I told her that postponing was not failure, it was maturity. She rested her head against the seat and gave a single nod that felt like both surrender and relief. We walked back in together, not because we needed an audience, but because that is what you do when you put out a fire. You walk toward the heat. Inside, the venue manager was speaking with the voice of someone who handles crises for a living. The caterer had a plan for the unused food. The photographer offered to reschedule. The groom's mother hugged Haley in a way that made me rethink every stereotype I ever had about in-laws. There were no theatrics. There was a decision to postpone and send everyone home with dignity. Cameron was a no-show. He had left the rehearsal the night before and was not answering any calls. Monica looked like a person trying to hold up a set that was built too fast. She tried once to confront me, not physically, but with words sharpened by embarrassment. The venue manager stepped between us and told her this was not the time, and if she wanted to speak with me, she could do it later in writing. Professional angels deserve raises. We spent an hour turning a wedding into a controlled pause. Guests were informed, staff were thanked. Nobody threw anything. The world did not end. The only casualty was pride. That heals slower than bone, but it heals. Back at my house, the dress waited like a question. I took it out, inspected it again, and tried to separate the fabric from the feelings attached to it. It did not work. I put it back and closed the closet. On Monday morning, I got a call from a number I did not know. It was Danielle, the legal wife. She thanked me, not with flowery words, but with the simple gratitude of someone finally getting traction after months of spinning their wheels. She told me the service meant her case could move forward. She said she was sorry my family got hit with shrapnel from a disaster she did not cause. I told her I appreciated the call and that I did not need updates. I wished her well. We hung up. In the aftermath, you learn absurdly simple truths. People have a finite capacity to be lied to and an equally finite capacity to admit they were fooled. Monica fell into the second category. She wanted to believe Cameron and tried to arrange the facts on the table to fit the story she had in her head. She said the marriage was a technicality, that it was basically over, that papers do not mean anything when hearts have already left. The legal documents disagreed. The more she tried to defend the indefensible, the more she isolated herself. I did not push her. She is my daughter's mother. That war was over years ago. You do not score points this late in the game. Haley came to my house 3 days after the postponed wedding and sat at my kitchen table. She apologized. It was not the kind of apology people give when they want to reset the game without moving any pieces. It was a real one. She said she had let her need for independence turn into performative rebellion. She said letting Cameron walk her down the aisle had been a way to hurt me for not letting her life move as fast as she wanted it to. She admitted he had been whispering things to her about real men and taking control, and that she had mistaken that volume for leadership. She cried. I listened. Then I told her the boundary I had set was still important. I told her my support is a commitment, not a leash, and that I would never again attach it to humiliation. If she wanted me at her wedding, it had to be on a day where respect was not an afterthought. She asked about the dress. I told her it was safe, and it would be hers when we got to a place that made sense. Sometimes waiting is the most loving thing you can do. Sometimes giving someone an expensive gift in the middle of a storm is just handing them an anchor. A week later, we sat down with Tristan and his parents. They were steady. They had questions about timelines and money because they were practical people. We scrapped dates and wrote a plan that looked like adulthood, premarital counseling, a budget they could actually cover with their own income, and a smaller ceremony in 6 months with a reception later. I offered to pay for the counseling. I told them I was not paying for bands or string lights. I told them I would set aside the same amount I had originally offered, but it would be released against invoices in my name only when the expenses fit the new plan. No drama, just guardrails. I also made another choice. The night before their first counseling session, I moved $15,000 into a new account and labeled it First Home Down Payment. I told Haley that is where the dress money would go if they did not use that dress. Not as punishment, but as a reallocation. If she wanted the original dress for the new wedding, fine. If she wanted a simpler dress and a fund for a future home, also fine. She asked for a day to think. She took a week, then came back and said she wanted a simpler dress. I called the boutique and asked about consignment. They offered to resell it for a percentage. I agreed. It was on the floor for a month and sold to another bride who liked stories. The check went into the down payment account. Some people will say the real revenge here is that the man who tried to take my place was served in front of a room full of people and then disappeared into paperwork he could not charm his way out of. That is clean. It satisfies something primal when you have been disrespected and told to swallow it. But the revenge that matters to me looks different. It looks like a father refusing to fund his own erasure and then using every legal and ethical tool available to stop an empty man from wearing a father's mask. It looks like a daughter learning the difference between loud and strong. It looks like a family deciding to grow up instead of insisting on a lie. Monica and I are not on good terms right now. We communicate by text. Logistics only. She still believes I weaponized money. I believe I defended my dignity with the same seriousness that I defended my daughter's safety. We do not agree. We do not have to. Tristan and Haley got married 6 months later in a small courthouse ceremony, in a rented room with good light and clean walls. She wore a simple, elegant dress that did not need special handling. I wore a suit that had seen more board meetings than weddings. I walked her down the aisle because she asked me to, not because the room required it. She squeezed my forearm once in a code that said, "We learned." The officiant said the words. They signed the papers. It counted because it was real. We went to lunch afterward. No speeches, no rehearsed tears, just two families trying to build something sustainable. The photographer from the postponed wedding came on her own dime and took some pictures on the courthouse steps because she said she believed in second drafts. We still paid her bill. The down payment account stayed with the same name and grew. I matched their savings for a year. When they found a starter home that did not pretend to be more than it was, we closed the deal. I helped them paint the living room. We argued about where to put the couch. We laughed. They messed up and then they fixed it. They learned to plan. Sometimes people ask about the dress when the story gets around. They ask if I kept it as a trophy or returned it with a grand gesture. The truth is more boring. It was sold to a bride we will never meet, and the money bought lumber, paint, and a front door that does not stick in the winter. It is not dramatic enough for strangers, but it is exactly the kind of ending I trust. I did not record the service. I did not send the documents to anyone but those who needed to see them, not because I am kinder than other people, but because I have been humbled in rooms smaller than a rehearsal dinner. And I know that revenge that tries to humiliate back loses in the long run. What I did was simple. I stopped paying for a narrative where I was a bystander and put the truth where it could do its work. When the court clerk handed me a copy of the signed certificate after the small ceremony, I remembered the living room where a girl told her father he did not own her, as if that was something he had ever claimed. I remembered the man with the watch and the laugh. I remembered the feeling in my chest when I lifted a dress off the boutique counter. None of that went away. It does not. It just gets filed correctly inside you so it does not warp everything else. The night after the courthouse wedding, Haley and Tristan sat on my couch and opened a card I had written that felt more like a field manual than congratulations. Inside was a list of numbers, mortgage rate ranges, an amortization estimate, the average lifespan of an HVAC system, the expected cost of tires, and a broken-down monthly budget template. There was also a small check. Nothing flashy, just enough for a better bed. You cannot build a good marriage without good sleep. They laughed at the template, not because it was absurd, but because it was so me. Haley apologized again, quietly, without ceremony. I told her apologies lose their power when they become a routine. What mattered was that when she had the chance to make it right, she did. She made a choice I could stand behind. That was what I needed as a father. Not praise, but alignment. Months later, a mutual friend told me Cameron had moved to another state. He and Monica were no longer together. I did not celebrate. I did not share the news like a victory lap. I took the information and put it in the folder in my head labeled inevitable. Some people wander through rooms until they find one where nobody asks questions. That is not my problem. My problem is the roof over my daughter's head and the spine in her back. If you are reading this because you are the father paying with a smile, while people who do not even know your middle name make decisions in your house, hear me. You do not have to fund your own erasure to be a good man. You can love your child and still say no when love becomes a costume someone else wants to wear. The revenge was not loud. It did not need to be. It worked. It made the right person look in the mirror without me standing there. It returned me to my proper place, which is not center stage, but present, steady, unbent. That is enough. The boutique sent a thank you note after the original dress sold. They included a small credit for future alterations, which we transferred to Haley's new dress. It was used to tailor a dress that cost less than the handmade work on the first one and fit her better because it fit her life better. The venue returned half the deposit after we negotiated the postponement. The photographer threw in a free hour for the courthouse day. The caterer kept the deposit because the contract said so, and I did not fight it. They had prepared food for a guest count that never arrived. Sometimes you absorb a loss because it is your loss to absorb. The travel refund was complete in a week. I closed that credit card account and opened a new one because I do not like the past hanging over me. I added a line item to my budget titled Boundary Tax. It is there to remind me that standing up for yourself sometimes costs money, and it is still cheaper than paying for your own disappearance. If anyone is wondering, yes, I slept well after the courthouse wedding. Not because everything was fixed, but because everything was honest. There is a difference you feel in your bones. And for anyone tempted to write that I overreacted or should have just let it go, understand this. A father's job is not to be endlessly generous at his own expense. It is to protect, provide, and set an example. I set an example of how a man stays when he is welcome and leaves when he is not, without burning down the building on his way out. I set an example of how you use the system, not rumors. I set an example of what it means to say yes with your whole chest and no with the same conviction. That is the kind of revenge that lasts, not the headline, but the foundation. Comment. I wanted to share this story because it shows that true strength is often quiet and steady. Setting a boundary is not an act of aggression, but an act of profound self-respect. You never have to pay for a ticket to your own disappearance. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to step back and let the truth do its work. Responsibility is the first step toward genuine healing for everyone involved. We all have the power to choose a quiet resolution over a loud conflict. I encourage you to protect your own peace with that same quiet conviction. Remember that you can love someone deeply while still saying no to a situation that compromises your dignity. Our lives are about building strong foundations with integrity, not just winning temporary debates. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.